Hello and welcome back. Now that we've seen how to deploy a monolithic Terraform app through GitHub with Spacelift, let's create some modules to make this deployment a little more flexible. This will allow us to easily spin up extra development instances without having to touch or even allow access to the underlying infrastructure such as the VPC, subnets, security groups, etc. So let's get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to split up our infrastructure resources, such as the VPC, subnet, internet gateway, etc., and the compute resources, such as the key pair and the instance. So what I'm going to do first is just create two folders for those. So let's go ahead and create a new folder. And I'm actually just going to call one of them networking. And I'll call the other one compute, just like so. So now within the networking folder, I'm going to create a networking.tf, just like so. And the reason I'm calling it networking.tf instead of main.tf is honestly just so we don't get lost while moving between all of these folders and files. Now we will want to rename this to main.tf to follow standard convention, but for right now, it'll make this entire lesson a little easier to follow. So let's go ahead and get the networking resources into this file here. So I'm just going to scroll up to the top and just grab everything down to the key pair, just like so. Going to Control X that. And save and paste that into here. And save, just like so. So now that I've done that, let's go back to our main.tf. And let's just highlight everything else here. Cut that out. I'll save that file so I remember. And in compute, I'm just going to create a new file, compute.tf, just like so. And paste that in. And save. Alright, so the next thing we have to think about is within this compute file, how are we supposed to get to our subnet ID and security group IDs? Since these are two different modules, they actually are unable to just communicate with each other outright. We actually have to do a little bit of legwork to ensure that both of these can communicate. So what I want to do is I want to output those values that we need from the networking.tf file. And then we're going to end up inputting them as variables into the compute.tf file. So what I want to do first is create a new file, outputs.tf, within our networking directory here. And what I want to do is create two outputs. So output, security group ID, just like so. Open and close some brackets there. And what we want is we want the AWS security group mtcsg.id. So if you look over here in the networking file, we can scroll down to the security group. And as you can see, AWS security group mtcsg, and we need that ID. You can also find that here in compute.tf. As you can see, now also notice that it is in brackets here. Now we're not going to use these brackets in our outputs. We're going to use those brackets in another place. But right now, this is what we need. So what we can do is we can actually copy this, Control C, and head back over to our outputs and set that value equal to that, just like so. Now, if you know you're going to need multiple different outputs, you can also remove this ID, which will give you access to the entire security group object. But if you know for a fact all you need is the ID anywhere else, it's a good practice to make sure that that's all you export, because anything you export is accessible from other modules, and that may not be something you want to have accessible. So go ahead and save that, and now let's work on the subnet ID output. So we'll say output, subnet ID, just like so. Value equals, and if I head back over to compute here, we can see that we need this value, AWS subnet, MTC public subnet.id. And we are going to change these soon, but we're just not going to do it yet. So go ahead and paste that in, and that is everything we need for the outputs. So now everything in networking for right now is good. We don't have any variables we need to address or anything like that. So let's go ahead and head over to compute and start to get that ready. So now over here in compute, we need to make sure it has access to everything that it needs to access. For instance, we've got userdata.tpl, and we've also got a data source here. Now right now our data sources.tf are outside of that directory. So let's go ahead and move data sources.tf right here into the compute directory, just like so. So now that has access to our data sources and we don't need to do anything else. Perfect. And then what I want to do on top of that is just go ahead here, this VPC security group ID, and I want to change that to var.security group ID, just like so. We haven't created this variable yet, but we're going to. So our subnet ID is going to be var.subnet ID, just like that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to move this user data file here into the compute directory. And then to reference that properly, and to ensure we never have a problem referencing it, what I'm going to do is use my interpolation syntax. And we're going to say path.module/userdata.tpl. So what that does is ensure that we're accessing the path of the module to get to userdata.tpl. All right. And we're getting close to finishing up here. The next thing we need to do is we need a variables.tf file. New file, variables.tf, of course. And then what I need to do is create the variables that we did here, security group ID and subnet ID. So let's go ahead and do that. Variable, subnet ID, and that type is going to equal a list. Remember, it's in those brackets. And then we have a variable, security group ID, and that type is going to be a string, just like so. So now we have variables set up. We've got everything here replaced within our compute. The one more thing we need to do is we need to add the outputs for compute. So if we go down to outputs.tf, this is actually all fine. So we'll just drag that into the compute module here. And we are all set and ready to go for our two modules. So the next thing we need to do is actually write our main.tf that's going to reference those modules. So go ahead and mark this lesson complete, come on back to the next one, and let's continue the course.